Have you ever given over a decade of your life to a company, believing loyalty would eventually be rewarded, only to be laughed at when you asked for something as basic as a 10% raise? That's exactly what happened to me, and it triggered a chain of events that would upend not just my life, but the entire logistics industry. I'm Ivy Reynolds, 35 years old, living in Indianapolis, and for the past 12 years I have been a supply chain algorithm specialist at Porter Logistics Solutions. You probably haven't heard of me, but chances are you've benefited from my work. My systems powered some of the fastest and most cost-efficient delivery routes across the Midwest. For a long time, I thought working in silence was a virtue, that if I kept improving, someone would notice. But they didn't. One day, I decided I was done waiting for permission to proceed. What happened after that, well, it includes my boss losing everything, a billion-dollar contract shifting companies, and a courtroom battle that rewrote how intellectual property works in tech jobs. But it all started in a glass-walled office, with one man's laughter echoing through the building, as I stood there holding 12 years of my achievement in a leather-bound portfolio. Garrett Coleman, our CEO, leaned back in his designer chair, grinning like he was the cleverest man alive. "You want a 10% raise? After what, 12 years? That's adorable." He actually laughed. Not a chuckle, a full, shoulder-shaking laugh that bounced off the walls like I'd told him a joke. I stood there, gripping my portfolio of hard data, 60 pages detailing every algorithm, every logistical breakthrough, every 18-hour day I'd spent optimizing their broken systems. I had documented proof that my supply chain design for the Eastwood account had cut delivery times by 50% and costs by nearly 40%. That one account alone had brought in millions in renewed contracts. I laid it all out, numbers and results as clean and sharp as I could make them. But Garrett waved a hand, still chuckling, and said, "Look, you're good, but let's be honest. You're a back-effort function. The board doesn't even know your name. If you think you're worth more, I don't know, go try your luck elsewhere." That was the moment something broke inside me. Not my heart, something deeper. It was the foundation I'd built everything on, the belief that hard work mattered, that loyalty mattered. That mattered. I swallowed hard, nodded, and said quietly, "I understand." Then I picked up my trembling pages and walked out of that office, the echoes of his laughter still ringing behind me. I passed by the row of executive suites, some of them occupied by people half as experienced as me, making double the salary, and made my way to the far corner of the 5th floor. My cubicle. After 12 years, I still didn't have a door, just a little desk, some chipped cabinets, and a monitor that had seen better days. All around me were empty desks. Our team had shrunk from 15 to just 3 over the years, not because we needed fewer people, but because I had automated so much with the systems I created. The irony? My work had made most of my colleagues redundant, and the only reward I'd received was silence. I sat down and stared at the notification on my screen. Company newsletter, praising Garrett Coleman's revolutionary logistics strategy that rescued the Eastwood account. My strategy. My 6 months of skipped weekends and overnight simulations. I stared at the framed photo next to my keyboard. My parents, smiling. My dad worked 35 years in a parts factory before it was shut down. He used to say, "Loyalty always pays off eventually." My mom believed it too. I wanted to believe it, but not anymore. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the small leather notebook I always carried. Inside were sketches, equations, code snippets, every personal project I'd ever worked on outside company hours. These were mine, developed on my own laptop, on my own time. I had timestamps, notes, and even development logs showing exactly when and how I created each system, including the predictive modeling software that formed the basis of Porter's logistics engine. What Garrett never knew, and what legal had never cared to check, was that I'd never signed over the rights to these innovations. The standard contract covered work done using company time and equipment. My most valuable creations didn't fall under that umbrella. I flipped to the page dated nearly 3 years ago. Project Forecast Grid, Predictive Delivery Routing Model, tested on the home network, not presented to the company, retained for personal IP. That algorithm alone had saved Porter over $20 million 0 cents. They'd implemented it directly from my trial demos, never once asking where it came from or offering any compensation because I'd never pushed. I'd been the kind of employee who said thank you when told no, who thought being useful was enough to be valued. But I was done with that. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I'd saved but never called. Hayden Blake, Operations Director at Radius Logistics, Porter's biggest competitor. He'd reached out a few times over the years. His last message, sent 6 months ago, simply read, "The offer still stands. We value people who innovate." I stared at the screen for a long moment. 12 years of programming told me to play it safe. Don't rock the boat. Don't burn bridges. But then I remembered Garrett's laughter. I pressed call. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, Hayden speaking. I took a breath. "This is Ivy Reynolds from Porter." A pause. Then his voice lit up. "Ivy, I was starting to think you'd never call. Are you available tonight?" 5 hours later, I was seated across from him in a downtown restaurant with waitlists 3 weeks long. He made one call and got us in. That should have told me everything. I thought dinner would just be talk, but what Hayden offered me that night wasn't just a job. It was the chance to finally take back what I had built. Hayden didn't waste time with flattery. He got straight to the point. "I've been following your work for a long time," he said, setting his water glass aside. "Or more accurately, I've been following the unexplained leaps in Porter's capabilities, jumps in efficiency that seemed to appear overnight." He leaned in slightly. "We tried to reverse engineer your Eastwood algorithms. We couldn't. That's when I knew Porter had someone like you." I blinked, still a little stunned. "How did you know it was me?" Hayden smiled. "Because Garrett Coleman doesn't have the technical background to build what you did, because your LinkedIn profile went quiet during the same period, Porter's systems improved dramatically. You left a pattern, a brilliant one." I glanced down at the notebook in my bag, the one holding a decade of breakthroughs. "What are you offering?" I asked carefully. He didn't hesitate. "Director-level position. You build your own team, triple your current salary, equity, most importantly, your name on every innovation, recognition, and IP rights. If you want to bring any of your personal projects with you, we'll run them through a proper acquisition process. Fair payment, full credit." My chest tightened. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. "That's not how it works at Porter," I said. "They don't even ask where ideas come from. They just take." Hayden nodded like he'd seen this story before. "Exactly why we want you." I reached into my bag and placed the notebook on the table. "This is a record of every personal system I built, developed at home on my equipment. Porter implemented them without formal acquisition." Hayden's fingers gently flipped through the pages. After a few minutes he looked up, his expression unreadable. "That's quite an oversight on their legal department's part." I smiled faintly. Garrett always said legal was just a formality. Hayden leaned back. "Not anymore." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up rereading my notes, my old emails, and every missed opportunity I'd let slip because I believed hard work would speak for itself. By morning, I was done doubting. I typed up my resignation letter. 2 weeks later, I placed that letter on Garrett's desk. He barely looked up. 2 weeks' notice, he muttered, scanning it. "Where are you going?" I considered lying, but decided the truth had more impact. "Radius." His eyes snapped up. "You're going to our competitor? Right when we're negotiating Eastwood's expansion?" I nodded. "I designed the delivery model in that proposal." His mouth opened slightly. "You built that?" I didn't answer. "Let's talk retention," he said quickly. "That raise you wanted, we can revisit it." I stood straighter. "Radius is offering triple my salary. And my own team." Garrett laughed, but it sounded different this time, forced. They're overpaying. You'll be overwhelmed. When they realize you can't deliver, they'll regret it. I smiled. We'll see. My last 2 weeks were strangely quiet. I documented everything and trained my replacement, an eager recent grad who seemed simultaneously terrified and impressed. I backed up every file showing my personal work and saved copies of emails where I'd shared these innovations with management without ever signing ownership over. On my final day, I sat across from Vance, our legal counsel, for my exit interview. Just a few forms, he said, pushing a stack toward me. Standard non-compete, confidentiality, affirmation that you're not taking company property. I flipped through and stopped. I'm not signing the non-compete, I said. Vance blinked. It's standard. It wasn't in my original contract, and I'm not agreeing now. He hesitated. Are you taking any company materials? No, I replied, but I am taking my personal intellectual property that was never formally acquired. Vance frowned. What personal property? I opened my notebook and pushed it toward him. These systems were developed on personal time using personal tools. Porter implemented them without any acquisition process. Vance flipped through, his brow tightening. This is everything we use? I nodded. I know. He looked at me. I need to make some calls. I stood. You can, but my employment ends today and my property leaves with me. I walked out of Porter's Glass headquarters at 5:17 p.m. that Friday. The air felt different, lighter. By Monday morning, I was in my new office at Radius. Real door, real title, real respect. My team of 5 specialists waited as I laid out our first roadmap, implementing forecast grid across Radius's core clients. Within 6 weeks, delivery times dropped by 30%, operating costs by 25%, and our sales team brought new data to Eastwood showing we could outperform Porter's best numbers. They switched contracts immediately. That morning my phone buzzed. Caller ID Garrett Coleman. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Then a third time. On the 4th, he left a message. Ivy, we need to talk. We're prepared to make you a substantial offer for consulting. Please call me back. I saved the message, but didn't return the call. What I didn't expect next was Garrett showing up in my parking garage, desperate. And what he said to me would make it clear just how far his empire had fallen. It was a Wednesday evening when I found Garrett Coleman standing beside my car in the Radius parking garage. I froze for half a second, instinctively checking my surroundings. He stepped forward, hands raised slightly as if to say he came in peace. This is inappropriate, I said, my voice firm. You shouldn't be here. Garrett looked different, tired, disheveled, the usual smug polish gone. You've put hundreds of jobs at risk, he said, his voice low and tense. Porter is facing a crisis because of what you took. I held his gaze. I didn't take anything that belonged to Porter, I said slowly. I took my personal intellectual property. Porter used it without proper acquisition, he scoffed. No one's going to believe that. It looks like corporate sabotage. I pulled out my phone and it was already recording. I have time-stamped documentation, every file, every note, every email. Where ownership was never transferred, your legal team never did their job. You never cared enough to ask. Garrett's mask slipped. Desperation filled his eyes. Name your price, he said. Whatever Radius is paying, we'll double it. I looked at him and saw not the CEO who laughed at my raise request, but a man watching his empire crumble. You once told me everyone's replaceable, I said quietly. Even me. I'm just following your business advice. I walked past him without another word. The next quarter, Porter's stock plummeted by 62%. 200 employees were laid off. The media called it a catastrophic collapse of technical infrastructure. Garrett resigned under board pressure. I watched the announcement from my office, then returned to reviewing implementation plans for 3 new clients who had switched from Porter to Radius. It felt complex, not satisfying exactly, but just like setting a broken bone. Then came the lawsuit. Porter sued me for theft of intellectual property, but in court, my documentation spoke louder than any accusation. The judge dismissed the case, noting that Porter failed to secure ownership of the innovations they'd built their company on. My systems, developed independently, remained mine. The legal victory was clean, but what followed wasn't. I began receiving emails, calls, LinkedIn messages, some congratulatory, others not. The worst came from former Porter employees, people I had worked with, shared lunch with, laughed with, who had lost their jobs in the fallout. Some were supportive, others accused me of betrayal. And one, Marlene, showed up in person. Marlene had been Porter's head of customer service for over a decade. We weren't close, but she'd always been kind to me. Now she stood in my office, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "I lost my job," she said flatly, "along with my entire team." I offered her water. She declined. "Everyone's saying this is your fault, that you brought your work here, that's why Porter collapsed." I didn't flinch. "I brought what was mine," I said calmly. The court agreed. She nodded slowly. "I'm 56, Ivy. Who's going to hire me now?" I leaned forward. "Radius needs customer experience leadership. Let me talk to Hayden." She shook her head. "I didn't come for a job." "Then why?" I asked. Her eyes scanned the room. My office, the view, the awards. I wanted to see if it was worth it, if what you got was worth it. What happened to the rest of us? Her words sat in the air like smoke. After she left, I didn't move for a long time. Hayden texted, "Quarterly numbers are up 18%, celebration dinner?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet. I titled it Operation Rebound. I listed every Porter employee I knew had been affected. By midnight, I had over 200 names. The next morning, I walked into Hayden's office and dropped the list on his desk. "We've benefited enormously from Porter's collapse. Now we need to take responsibility." He raised an eyebrow. "You want us to hire all of them? Interview the qualified, offer training for others. For retirees, consulting roles, we have the budget and it's the right thing to do." Hayden looked at the spreadsheet, then at me. "Draft the proposal. I'll take it to the board." 3 weeks later, Operation Rebound launched. Radius publicly committed to interviewing every qualified displaced Porter employee. We partnered with training firms. We offered part-time consulting contracts for seniors. Business journals picked up the story, our reputations soared, applications tripled. And that's when Marlene called. "Was this your doing?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Would you reconsider joining Radius?" A pause. "Maybe as a consultant." 2 days later, she was setting up an office 2 doors down from mine. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the rest. What comes next proves just how deep corporate betrayal can go, and how redemption can come from the unlikeliest source. Not everyone welcomed Operation Rebound. Some saw it as charity. Others saw it as a painful reminder of what they'd lost. Jason, Porter's former operations manager, refused to return my call. Patrice from accounting sent me an email titled, "Loyalty Isn't a Game," filled with biting lines about betrayal and how I'd become the villain in someone else's origin story. I archived it under a folder labeled Consequences. That's the thing they don't tell you about standing up for yourself. It doesn't come clean. It comes with splinters. You may win, but not everyone cheers. Still, I kept building. Within 2 months, we'd hired over 100 displaced Porter staff. Marlene became our chief of customer experience. Jason eventually joined as a consultant. Even Vance, the former legal counsel who tried to push that non-compete on me, came on board to help with IP protections at Radius. The irony didn't escape me. The same people who once told me I wasn't worth a 10% raise were now rebuilding something better. Together. 8 months after I left Porter, I received an unexpected email from Vance. "Coffee? There's something you should know." We met at a quiet cafe downtown. He looked older and more tired. "They let me go last month," he said as he stirred his coffee. "Last round of cuts. But that's not why I reached out. It's about your algorithms." I tensed. "The court already ruled." He nodded. "This isn't about the case. It's about what I found after. Do you remember your exit interview? When you said you developed your systems independently?" "Yes." Vance leaned in. "After that, I started digging. I found archived emails from 3 years ago. Emails you sent directly to Garrett outlining your projects. You offered the company a chance to acquire them formally. You even proposed fair compensation. He replied dismissively, told you to implement what worked and that we'll sort out the paperwork later." My chest tightened. "I don't remember that." "You CC'd me. That's how I found them." He paused. "He knew? All along, Garrett knew you'd built those systems, knew he hadn't secured rights, and sued you anyway." The shock hit me slowly, like cold water spreading down my spine. "Why are you telling me this now?" Vance's eyes were steady. "Because I want you to know. You didn't bring down Porter, Garrett did. He ignored legal advice, he made decisions based on ego, not ethics. What happened wasn't just about one algorithm, it was about a culture of dismissal." As I drove home, those words echoed. Garrett hadn't just underestimated me, he'd bet his entire company that I'd never push back. He was wrong. The next day, my phone rang again. Garrett. I almost sent it to voicemail, then answered. "Ivy," he said, voice raw. "I'm calling to apologize." I stayed quiet. "I knew about your projects. I didn't think you'd ever leave. I misjudged you." "Yes," I said simply. "You did." He sighed. "The board removed me yesterday. Porter's filing for Chapter 11. My heart sank. "What about the employees?" "That's why I'm calling. We have one final board meeting. Severance packages are being discussed. I want to recommend your Radius program as a placement option." "You want me to take Porter's remaining staff?" "I want them to have a future. Pride doesn't matter anymore." I believed him, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because people do. The day Porter's bankruptcy filing went public, Radius's phones lit up. Clients left in droves. Hayden called an emergency meeting. "We need to scale fast. Ivy, your rebound program is now a top priority." Within 4 weeks, we onboarded 173 more former Porter staff. We opened 3 new regional offices. My team grew to 40, including engineers, data analysts, and customer liaisons, some of whom had once shared my floor at Porter, now thriving in a culture that saw them. 1 year after I walked out of Garrett's office, I stood on stage at the National Logistics Awards, accepting the Innovation Leadership Award. Cameras flashed. I looked out over a sea of faces, many familiar. Former cubicle neighbors, now teammates. "Innovation," I said into the microphone, "isn't just about systems or code. It's about recognizing people. When we treat them like they matter, they build the future with us." After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. "Ms. Reynolds," she said nervously, "I'm Tessa, new hire on the algorithms team. I wanted to ask, how did you know when it was time to stand up for yourself?" Her question stunned me. I thought back to my cubicle, my dad's photo, my shaking hands or holding that portfolio. "I waited 12 years too long," I admitted. "Don't do that." She nodded, then hesitated. "Aren't you worried about seeming difficult?" I smiled gently. "That's what they say when they want to underpay you. Don't apologize for asking to be treated fairly." She nodded again and walked away, shoulders a little straighter. And then I saw him. Garrett, standing near the exit, out of place in the sea of celebration. Our eyes met. He gave me a small nod. Not regret, not approval, just acknowledgement. I returned the nod. We were both changed by that 10% conversation. He lost everything. I gained more than I could have imagined. But even with a happy ending, there's always the question, was it worth it? When a former colleague confronts me about the cost of success, I'm forced to face the truth behind every victory. 2 years after walking out of Porter, I received a small, unmarked package at my office. Inside was a framed clipping from the Wall Street Journal, an article detailing the collapse of Porter and the meteoric rise of Radius. Attached was a handwritten note, "You were never replaceable." Gee. I stared at it for a long time, the weight of everything that had happened pressing against my chest like a closing door. Hung it in my office not as a trophy but as a reminder. Worth isn't something someone else grants you, it's something you must first believe in yourself. Last month, we launched a mentorship initiative for women in tech and logistics. The first workshop focused on salary negotiation, intellectual property protection, and the art of saying no without apology. Over 300 women attended. Marlene helped coordinate it. Tessa, now a team lead, gave a speech that ended in a standing ovation. At the end of the event, one of the participants, barely 25, eyes bright with hope, asked me a question that stayed with me. "Don't you feel bad about what happened to Porter?" I paused before answering because the truth was layered. "I feel responsible for my actions," I said, "but I don't feel guilty for claiming what was mine." That's the difference. People always imagine revenge is about fire and fury, lawsuits and downfall, but real revenge, at least for me, was quieter. It was the first time my name appeared on a patent. It was seeing my former colleagues thrive in a workplace that recognized their brilliance. It was watching Radius grow into a company driven not by fear, but by shared purpose. And yes, it was knowing that every decision I made came with a cost, but that I chose those costs myself and accepted them fully. Garrett lost his title. Porter lost their contracts, their infrastructure, and their reputation, but they didn't lose because of what I took. They lost because they never invested in what they had. They treated people as temporary assets. They forgot that behind every algorithm and every logistics plan, there's a human being putting their soul into that work. The system didn't break because of one resignation. It broke because it was hollow. I just happened to be the first person who walked away and said it out loud. There's no part of me that regrets building Radius, but I've never let myself forget the collateral damage. I still think about the ones who couldn't rebound as fast, the ones who sent angry messages, and the ones who disappeared from LinkedIn altogether. I still keep that consequences folder, not because I feel shame, but because I want to stay grounded. No matter how high you rise, you should never forget where you started or who you walked past on the way. Today, I lead a team of over 60 specialists, most of them former Porter employees. We've expanded to 4 states. Our systems power 23% of the regional logistics infrastructure. I no longer sit in a cubicle, but sometimes, in the quiet of early mornings, I think about the old me, head down, quiet, praying someone would finally notice the work I was killing myself to produce. I think about the day I asked for a 10% raise and how that tiny number revealed the massive gap between how I saw my worth and how others did. Now, I teach others to never wait that long. I tell them to track their contributions, document their ideas, and never give up ownership without asking what it's truly worth. If this story finds you in a place where you feel invisible, undervalued, and afraid to speak up, I hope it's the sign you need to stop shrinking. You are not replaceable. No one is. Recap. After 12 years of loyal work at Porter, I was laughed at for asking for a fair raise. That moment led me to reclaim ownership of my innovations, join a rival firm, and trigger a full-scale industry shift. Porter collapsed under its own arrogance, while Radius thrived by valuing people. In the end, I didn't just win a new job, I changed the rules of the game. And now I want to ask you something. Be honest. If you were in my position, after 12 years of loyalty being denied a basic raise, knowing you built something revolutionary, what would you have done? Stay, hope things improve, keep your head down, leave, claim what's yours, and fight for the recognition you deserve? Tell me in the comments. There's no wrong answer, only honest ones. If this story resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more true stories that might just change how you see your own life. And remember, your value is not a punchline, it's a foundation. Build everything on it.